Korean Air Flight 801 was a Korean Air scheduled international passenger flight. The plane crashed on the approach to Antonio B. Won-Pat International Airport in the U.S. territory of Guam on August 6, 1997, killing 229 of the 254 people on board. It was one of the deadliest plane crashes in the history of South Korea. What happened during the flight? Why did the plane crash? Stick to the end of the video and know all the answers. Hello and welcome to Plane Crashes Explained, where we discuss some of the most mind-blowing reasons and facts behind the most heinous plane crashes. Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so you don't miss future updates. Without further ado, let's get straight into this. While approaching the airport, the plane crashed on Bijia Peak, south of Nimitz Hill on Asan Maina, Guam. The National Transportation Safety Board attributes the air crash to poor communication among the flight crew and the captain's poor decision-making on the non-precision approach. Flight 801 was normally flown by an Airbus A300, but because Korean Air has scheduled the flight to transport Chamorro athletes to the South Pacific Mini-Games in American Samoa on August 5th and 6th, the airline designated HL7468, a 12-year-old Boeing 747-300, delivered to Korean Air on December 12, 1984 to fly the route that night. At 8:53 p.m., Flight 801 took off from Seoul Gimpo International Airport, now known as Gimpo International Airport. On its way to Guam on August 5th, it carried 254 passengers, including 3 crew members, 14 flight attendants, and 237 passengers from 4 countries. 3 of the passengers were children aged 2 to 12, and 3 were 24 months or younger. 6 of the passengers were deadheading Korean Air flight attendants. The flight had some turbulence but was otherwise uneventful until shortly after 1 a.m. on August 6th, when the plane was preparing to land. Because of the heavy rain on Guam, visibility was severely reduced and the crew attempted an instrument landing. The glide slope instrument landing system for runway 6L was unavailable. On the other hand, Captain Park believed it was working and managed to pick up a signal at 1:35 a.m. that was later identified as coming from an irrelevant electronic device on the ground. Despite flight engineer Nam's protest that the detected signal was not the glide slope indicator, Park pressed on, and at 1:42 a.m., the aircraft crashed into Bijia Peak just short of the Nimitz VOR navigation beacon, about 3 nautical miles short of the runway at an altitude of 660 feet. The Fanti River Valley separates the Nimitz VOR from Nimitz Hill, despite its name, with Nimitz Hill Annex being the closest inhabited place. The crash killed 229 of the 254 passengers on board. One survivor, 36-year-old Hung Seong-hong of the United States, who was in seat 3B in first class, said the crash happened so fast that the passengers had no time to scream and compared the crash to a scene from a movie. Weather, terrain, and other issues hindered the rescue effort. Due to a fuel pipeline that was destroyed in the crash, emergency vehicles could not approach. NMC B-133 United States Navy Seabees were among the first on the scene, using their equipment to clear roadways and timber from the crash site. Backhoes were used to crack open the still-burning plane to rescue survivors, and mortuary tents were set up for first responders. The administration of the effort was muddled. The crash occurred on U.S. Navy property, but civil authorities claimed authority at first. The hull had disintegrated and jet fuel in the wing tanks had ignited a fire that had lasted 8 hours after impact. Governor Carl Gutierrez located 11-year-old Rika Matsuda of Japan, who had boarded the flight with her mother Shigeko, who was 44. They were taking a vacation to Guam. Rika Matsuda told interpreters what happened to her and her mother. As the crash occurred, luggage piled on the girl and her mother. Rika Matsuda stated that her mother, unable to free herself, requested her to leave the plane. Shigeko was killed in the fire. After fleeing the plane, Rika found a surviving flight attendant, Lee Yong-ho. They remained together until Gutierrez found them. 209 passengers and 14 crew members of the 254 people on board were killed at the crash site. 2 of the 31 occupants found alive by rescue crews died en route to the hospital, and 3 died once reached there. 16 of the survivors suffered burn injuries. Initially, the 26 survivors were treated at Guam Memorial Hospital in Tamuning, or Naval Hospital Guam in Agana Heights. 4 were later transferred to the U.S. Army Burn Center in San Antonio, Texas, and 8 to Seoul University Hospital. On October 10th of that year, 1 passenger died due to injuries, bringing the total number of fatalities to 229 and survivors to 25. The National Transportation Safety Board of the United States investigated the accident. The crew had been using an outdated flight map that was missing a 724-foot obstruction symbol depicted at the Nimitz VOR, and that map stated the minimum safe altitude for a landing aircraft while crossing the Nimitz VOR was 1,300 feet, rather than the updated altitude of 1,440 feet. Flight 801 crashed at 1:42 a.m. near the Nimitz VOR on Bajia Peak at 680 feet, when it descended below the minimum safe altitude of 1,440 feet during its landing. According to the report, the captain might have mistakenly believed that the plane was closer to the airport, and there might have been confusion about the location of the distance measuring equipment concerning the airport, with the crew expecting the VOR DME to be located at the airport. The DME was located at the Nimitz VOR, approximately 3.3 nautical miles from the airport. Such a configuration had not been part of Korean Air's simulation training, with the crew training for such non-precision approaches taking place in scenarios where the DME was located at the airport. Nonetheless, the approach chart displayed the correct DME distances. The NTSB questioned the flight crew's monitoring of the approach and why the first officer and flight engineer did not confront the captain about his errors. Even before the crash, Korean Air's Crew Resource Management Program attempted to foster a free environment among the flight crew, requiring the first officer and flight engineer to challenge the captain if they were concerned. The flight crew, however, did not begin to challenge the captain until 6 seconds before impact, when the first officer urged the captain to make up for a missed approach. According to the cockpit voice recorder, the flight crew suggested to the captain that he had made a mistake, but did not explicitly warn him. Air traffic control also influenced the accident. Kurt James Mayo, age 39, the center approach controller, did not follow standard ATC procedures and failed to monitor the aircraft during its descent. He specifically failed to monitor the flight after they switched to the tower frequency as required, failed to give the flight crew a position advisory when clearing them for the approach, which would have advised them to cross-check their position on the radar with that of other flight instruments, and failed to monitor the flight on the terminal radar display, which showed the terrain in the area because radar service had been terminated at the time. According to the NTSB, the accident could have been avoided or at least mitigated if Mayo had followed the procedures. Marty Irvin Theobald, the tower controller, was also chastised for failing to alert the crew as Mayo was unaware of the aircraft's low altitude and did not receive an alert. The NTSB also chastised emergency responders for the delayed rescue operation, claiming that most of the factors that caused the delay were avoidable. These factors included ATC's initial lack of awareness of the accident, a fire truck's brake failure, and the fire department's delayed notification. The NTSB also concluded that if the response had not been delayed, at least one person who survived the initial crash could have been recovered. According to the investigation report, one contributing factor was that the ATC minimum safe altitude warning system at Antonio B. Juan Pat International Airport had been intentionally modified to limit spurious alarms and could not detect an approaching aircraft below the minimum safe altitude. The captain's poor execution of the non-precision approach, the captain's fatigue, poor communication among the flight crew, and Korean Air's lack of flight crew training were all likely causes of the accident. On the first anniversary of the crash, August 5, 1998, a black marble obelisk was unveiled on the crash site as a memorial to the victims. Korean Air services to Guam were suspended for more than 4 years following the accident, resulting in lower tourist spending in Guam and lower revenue for Korean Air. When service between Seoul and Guam resumed in December 2001, the flight number was changed to 805. The flight number for its Seoul to Guam route has been changed to 111, and it now departs from Incheon rather than Gimpo using a Boeing 777-300ER or an Airbus A330. A miscommunication between the pilots and the air controller can really get ugly for the people on board. The crash would have most likely been avoided if the pilots had been a little observant and had more experience. Who was responsible for the accident, the pilots or the controllers? What do you think? Let us know in the comments section. If you found the video interesting, here are 2 more videos you'll probably like. Please leave a like on the video and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching.